Hi there, welcome to DesignSpark. Today we're going to be talking with Würth Elektronik and we're talking about tech tales. We'll be focusing on switches, which are the hero product that everybody integrates with every day.
Hi, Greg, and hello, everyone. My name is Linda, and I have been working in Würth for over 3 years now in the group of WISO's group under the business unit of switches, and currently as a product manager with the targeted on the rotary switches.
Linda, Würth Elektronik, obviously a big company, a global brand, but can you just give me a little bit of a background on Würth Elektronik?
Yeah, sure. W is a manufacturer of electronics and electromechanical components, and we are globally active and provide a wide range of product portfolios.
And obviously, the product range that we're talking about today, why are we saying that switches are important, for example?
I would say switches are, for me, switches is like a hidden champions. It is inevitable. For example, a question for you: as you walk into the office this morning, can you recall any switches that you have encountered?
Yeah, quite a few actually, because I was probably the first person in the office today. So for example, the light switch, then
That
switches on, and then switches on my bench for power, and the test equipment that I work with sometimes. So yeah, there's quite a lot of switches. Yes.
Yeah, that's why we all often says that switches is the hidden champion. For example, if I were in the industrial interior design office and I have switches on it, like, and it could be a toggle switch which I flip from off to on, and also the daily devices that we use, for example the computer mouse, we click on it, there's actually switches inside as well. And if you happen to reset the router, there are also switches inside, hidden inside. So it's everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you say, they're the champion products, and probably we don't
Sure.
know how much we interact with them on a daily basis, but we always expect them to work. And yeah, that's yeah. So could you provide me a little bit more details on the product ranges that we're going to cover today?
Okay. We have currently in total 11 product portfolios, and based on the operating mechanism, we have switches for pressing, sliding, and rotating. And we offer two solutions. One is the PCB solutions, which the switches require to be soldered, for example, wave soldering or reflow soldering. And the other solution is the front panel solution, which is often which you could directly notice from the housing, for example, the toggle switch and rocker switch.
So, in terms of the focus, can you go over some of the application examples of where these products will be typically used?
Yeah, so for example, I would say there are various kind of applications, but I will categorize the applications into three design concepts. The first group, I would say the end user interactions. For example, the switches that you have to directly interact with them. For example, tag switch, you click on it, push button, you push on it, and also this kind of front panel switches, for example, rocker switch and toggle switch. This is in the group of end user interactions. And the second group is about the setting and coding. For example, you come across this kind of industrial computer or control box. There are maybe a dip switch, slide switch, rotary switch, and also encoder inside. And the other design concept group is about detection, end stop, and temper. And we focus on the micro switch and detector. These are the applications more about the safety related or safety system, safety locks.
Yeah. I guess, from what you're saying there, and anybody who knows the breadth of switches, there is a big application coverage, like you were saying, in some of like the micro switch. And for example, being used for safety, disconnecting, making sure something is shut or making sure something is off before something else is switched into circuit. So yeah, switches are really, kind of like the be all and end all when it comes to engineering. You must have a really great selection of switches to do many different functions.
True.
Now, the thing about switches obviously is the technology itself. It's a very, very old technology in the terms of electrical engineering and electronics. But what are we seeing? Are there any recent innovations or advancements that you'd like to talk about?
Well, like you have mentioned about switches is like very old school, old technology, and it has been in the market for decades. And so basically, we are focusing on the quality aspect, how to make an ordinary switches outstanding to stand out, and we focus on the quality and innovations. We try to solve the pain points at the customer side. We try to think further, for example, do extra simulations in fields and to make it to catch users' heart and to make it innovation. So basically, our innovations aspect will be focusing on the quality side.
Right. Now, the other thing with obviously switches is, it's been very common in industry and the products adding value. But what is it that we can talk about in terms of maybe some of the challenges that engineers will face when it comes to switches, for example?
Yeah, for example, I think this kind of challenges I will sum up in three popular methods. The first method I would like to talk about is the flammability. Actually, flammability has little to do with the melting, but often when it comes to this kind of questions, how come there is melting issues? Even plastic material is with the flammability rating. So a question for you: if you were as a manufacturer of switches, will you use the recycled plastic when you are producing the switches?
That's a good question, actually. I hadn't really thought about that, because depending on where the switch was to be used, I guess would it rely on the type of plastic? But in general, probably.
Probably yes, with recycled plastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, true. This is totally correct. And sometimes, like what you have mentioned, some types of the switches that we use a virgin plastic raw material rather than this kind of recycled plastic. So yes, back to the questions I have asked. Actually, when we are manufacturing the switches, we do use the recycled plastic. But the key point is that, and especially essential point is that the mixture of the virgin plastic and the recycled plastic, and whether or not, and also the times of the recycled plastic you have been used. So the manufacturing side and the control of the recycled plastics materials times is very essential. And so to make sure that that after the there's no melting after and during the soldering process. So this is the one of the myths about the challenges that face at the engineer side. And the second myth I would like to share about is about the life cycle. Is the higher life cycle the better? What do you think? Is that so?
I think if you're reading about life cycle, the higher number is more attractive, but I think you have to understand the number and what that represents. So, a life cycle of a million operations, how actually long is that? But I do think, we do tend to look at the number of life cycle in terms of the number of operations we can get as being a quality issue as well, perhaps.
Yeah. We often come to this kind of inquiries about asking about how come the market player A is having this kind of high life cycle numbers and how come WE's life cycle is lower than the other market player. But I could totally understand their standpoint, because you are only reading from the data sheet and you compare the numbers. But people often forget to think about behind the reasons or behind the sin of the or the meaning of the numbers. For example, what are the force that you are going to apply on the switches, and what are the loads you are going to have when you apply? Is it what is the voltage? What is the current that you apply on the switches? And also the speed. Are you operating the speed during the life cycle test with high speed or low speed? These, like force, load, and speed, are all the variables that could influence on the life cycle's numbers.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah.
And at WE side, when the numbers we show on the data sheet about the life cycle, it is always with the full load.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And another myth I would like to talk about is the IP67, the ingress protection. So a question for you: is IP product IP67 switches can or cannot be washed? What do you think?
Okay. Now you're asking me to go back years ago when I was dealing with IP ratings. I think they can have a gentle spray and a wash down, but wouldn't submerge these switches.
Well, the second digit is about the water, and with the digit 7, it is able to submerge in the water for 30 minutes. Right. So I would say, to answer the questions, it can be washed. But often when it comes to this kind of statement from the market player, from market player's data sheet, they said there are IP67 switches, but there's always a tiny little footnote description saying cannot be washed. And for me, it's really confusing and contradicted. Yeah. But at WE side is very clear. IP67 switches can be washed, and we are our product portfolio of the IP67 switches is providing currently with tech switch and rotary switches. We are not self-declaration. We perform the test through the third party, and the test report upon request. Yeah. So back to the questions, when we talk about IP67 switches, whether or not can be washed, it is a affirmative feedback saying yes, we are able to wash, especially when customer are having this kind of unavoidable washing process, or after the soldering process, they are having this kind of cleaning process. We will always and only recommend them the IP67 switches.
Yeah. That's a really interesting point, because what you were saying about the contradictions, other manufacturers saying cannot be washed, and you are saying yes, we can wash them as well. So I think that's really important to consider as well, because a lot of these switches will make their way into environments, particularly where there could be a lot of ingress or a lot of spray water as well. So yeah, absolutely. Understanding those IP ratings is very, very clear. And I guess, for somebody who's been in the industry for a while, like myself, just to remind yourself about actually the IP rating, something very simple from time to time, just to remind yourself what they actually mean. The other thing that I did like you saying there was that you are not self-declared, so you're actually gone third party, which actually adds up to make sure that we are actually getting these independently verified from an external source, which is great. So in terms of the quality on products, Is there any additional information such as user guides or tools, or even something on sort of like the ESG, for example, environmental, social and governance? Is there anything you can tell me about Würth Elektronik there?
Sure. Quality is in our DNA when we come across the W switches, and W is a quality goalkeeper guarding the quality performance in upfront. And so apart from the standard reliability test, like we examine several aspects, for example, the plating capability, environmental aspect, for example, high temp, low temp, and thermal shocks, and also the aspect during the process, during the reflow soldering process, and also to look into the simulations side, and also lastly, the longevity of the switches, also known as a live test. So apart from all these series of the reliability test item, we also perform special tests. We try to think further. We try to simulate, do these simulations based on the applications, based on the potential usage at customer sites. So today I would like to share some special tests with you all, with the audience. The first special test I would like to share is about the static load. So imagine the switches are constantly in the on state, or the circuits stay on close for a long period of time. So what would happen? So we try to do this kind of simulation test and targeting on the switches such as dip switch, slide switch, and detector micro, which the switches will be tend to use on the on state for a long period of time. Another special test I would like to share is about the UV test, the ultraviolet test, UV test. For example, when we come to a plastic chair, there's a brittle one and a sturdy one. Which one would you pick?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the sturdy.
The sturdy one, right? The same as the rocker switch. And so the major material of the rocker switch consists of plastic. And so we think we try to simulate, especially rocker switches, the front panel solution is often well exhibited and not hidden in the casing. So we try to we perform the UV test target on the rocker switch. So throughout the test, it is with the alternate exposure of the ultraviolet radiance with darkness, and also with the humidity control. So after the test, we will want to make sure there's no cracks or defects or damage on a spot on the rocker switch. And the other special test I would like to share is about the ESD test. But we stress on the system level. I think ESD is we are quite familiar with the ESD test in our daily life. For example, we walk into the office and then touch on the metal doorknob, and then suddenly we receive a shock. And for example, in the winter time, and we take off the jumper and there's a zap noise. That is all about the static electricity. So ESD, there is component level test for the ESD, and also the system level of the ESD test. We, as a manufacturer, actually we could just perform the ESD test on the component level. But like mentioned earlier on, toggle switches, the front panel solution, it is directly interact with the end user. So we think and we believe that when we perform the ESD test on the system level for the toggle switch, it will be more practical and valuable for the designers.
I just want to maybe talk about a few examples or case studies, real world applications that you want to call out potentially.
Real applications, as I mentioned, there are various kind of applications So we tend to categorize the application into three, like we mentioned earlier on. End user interactions for some of the examples, such as mouse, computer mouse. When you open the computer mouse, it could be a tact switch, it could be a micro switch, especially for those computer mouse, which is a cheap one, and you disassemble the computer mouse, and then you see, oh, there's a tact switch inside. But if you are having at the same time this kind of high-end computer mouse, there's a micro switch inside. Yeah. And for example, the router as well, there are tact switch and push button. So these are some of the applications for the end user interactions. And the other group is about the setting and coding. Like I mentioned earlier on, this kind of control box, you do the settings with maybe dip switch and rotary switches.
Yeah.
And as for the safety related system safety logs, we tend to have this micro switch and detector. Yeah, so what I'm trying to say or trying to stress on is that same design concept, same devices, but different switches. So basically there's no single solutions.
Yeah, I think that's obviously important to call out. It's a combination of how we choose switches, how we use them in the application. But I think, through the conversation that you're talking a lot about the best practice and choosing the best switches for the application. And I just want to give a summary before we finish, because there's quite a lot to unpack in the conversation. So you're talking about all of the different types of application, where the switches are potentially used, the considerations in terms of the design of the switch, the material of the switch, how the switch works in certain applications. So I do think that's a really a widespread kind of consideration, because like I said at the beginning, we all expect switches to work when we press the switch, or we turn a toggle, or, whether it's a push button. And that is one of the things I think we overlook on a day-to-day basis, is how much design effort has gone into making sure that switch works perfectly all of the time for the application and the life of the product and where it's being used. So, Linda, I really do thank you for coming to DesignSpark today, talking about a subject which on the surface seems quite a simple subject, switches. Yeah. But when you look at the depth of what Würth Elektronik are doing, both in terms of the quality, the manufacturing, the testing, you make sure that those switches that you put into your applications are actually working. So, Linda, thanks for your time today. And yeah, I hope we can have you on DesignSpark again sometime soon.
Thank you for the time as well.